Chapter 97 Hunter's Dream. Life, indeed, was good. In fact, Sunny would even go so far as to say that, currently, it was wonderful. One would expect that being stuck in a cursed city located in the middle of an actual hell, surrounded by nothing but ruins and horrifying monsters, was not really the best way to live your life. But to him, this was somewhat of a paradise. To his surprise, Sunny had found out that this type of existence suited him pretty well. He had no obligations, no need to worry about the future, and, most importantly, was not required to interact with other humans. Humans always made things hard and complicated. He was sick of them. Being on your own was much better. He didn't have to pretend to be someone else, force himself to behave differently from how he wanted to, and strain his mind trying to understand people's convoluted feelings. For the first time in his life, Sunny could simply be himself. Turns out, his true self was very easy to please. He had no shortage of interesting things to do, explore, and kill. His life was very entertaining and comfortable, all things considered. It was at least way better than his pathetic existence in the outskirts, back in the real world. The key to this harmonious feeling was very simple. It was to have no hope. Sunny discovered that hope was the true enemy of peace. It was the most vile and poisonous thing in the universe. If there was even a glimmer of hope to return home, he would have been desperate, full of anxiety, and probably in the middle of some insane disaster right now. Like he had always been before. But without hope, things were simple and pleasant. He really couldn't wish for more. Keep telling yourself this crap. You might really believe it. Sunny grinned. What is there to believe? It's the truth. The shadow silently shook its head, long accustomed to his crazy tirades. Lately, Sunny had been talking with himself a lot, having long arguments that sometimes descended into screaming matches. It was a good way to pass the time. A bit later, he emerged from his secret chamber. Sunny's lair was situated in the upper part of a ruined cathedral, the entrance hidden behind a tall statue of some unknown goddess. There was a small balcony that allowed him to observe the grand hall of the temple over the goddess's shoulder, concealed from sight by the strands of her stone hair. The balcony was really high above the floor, making it impossible for any creature to climb on it by accident. Falling down would certainly kill a normal human. Sunny had discovered the hidden room while spying on the bastard that had gutted him. He had entered the cathedral through the hole in its roof and landed on one of the wide support beams, then walked across and accidentally noticed the small balcony. That's how he and the bastard had become neighbors. The bastard was, in fact, the guardian of this place. He patrolled the grand hall, killing anyone who dared to come inside. Sunny saw plenty of powerful nightmare creatures fall to his sword, cleaved apart without much effort. Of course, the bastard was a nightmare creature of considerable power himself. Sunny was pretty sure that he was at least a devil. Sharing the cathedral with the devil was very convenient. Sunny could sleep easy knowing that no monster would be able to reach the inner sanctum alive. Of course, he had to be careful to never be seen by his murderous roommate. On the upside, he could observe the devil as much as he wanted, waiting for a chance to exact his revenge. Sunny was hellbent on killing the damn knight, eventually. The bastard had to die. But before that, Sunny had to become stronger. Much, much stronger. Walking across the beams of the cathedral, he approached the hole in the roof and climbed through it. Outside, the night was already reigning over the world. It was time to hunt. A skeletal, hunched figure was slowly walking along the narrow street of the cursed city. The creature had long arms that ended with vicious claws and a deformed head with a wide mouth full of razor-sharp fangs. Even with its back bent, the monster was at least 2 meters tall. It was dressed in a torn shroud that was once white, but had long ago turned brown from the dried blood. This was Sunny's prey. The creature, which was called a blood fiend, was among the weakest dwellers of the cursed city. It was merely an awakened monster, barely intelligent and comparatively easy to kill. Of course, Nothing was really easy to kill here. After all, each and every human on the Forgotten Shore was just a dormant beast. Despite the fact that they shared the same rank and class, blood fiends were less formidable than carapace centurions in terms of strength and speed. However, that was only until they smelled blood, which sent them into a murderous frenzy. In that state, these fiends were a true menace. Pathetic, Sonny thought, stalking the nightmare creature from the shadows. He had killed a few of these monsters in the past, and had a great time each time, well, except for this one encounter where he had accidentally scratched himself on a sharp stone. That was not fun at all. Time to die, you ugly freak. The blood fiend was just about to turn the corner when a sudden sound attracted his attention. With unnatural speed, the monster turned around and fell on all fours, his sensitive ears picking up the slightest rustle. Then, he took a few careful steps forward and stopped at a certain spot. In front of the fiend, an ordinary-looking rock was lying on the ground. A second later, the rock suddenly spoke. "Behind you," it said politely. The creature froze for a moment, then turned around with lightning-fast speed. Something whistled in the air, and the upper part of the blood fiend's body separated from the lower. Still refusing to die, the monster reached out with its long arms. "Too slow!" Sonny slashed with the midnight shard, severing one of the arms at the elbow. Continuing the motion, he took a quick step forward and performed another strike, this time piercing the creature's skull. The tip of the tachi entered through one of its eyes and exited through the back of the head. All of it took less than a second. By the time both parts of the monster fell to the ground, Sonny had already retrieved his sword. Looking up with expectation, he smiled and waited. "Come on, say it!" As if answering his call, the spell whispered, "You have slain an awakened monster, blood fiend. Your shadow grows stronger." Sonny grinned. "Ah, thank you kindly. You're so sweet." The runes shimmered as they appeared in the air in front of him. Looking down, he read, "Shadow Fragments, 398/1000. Just 2 fragments away from 400. These days, he was progressing at a very respectable speed. In the beginning, back when he had not known the city and the creatures that populated it, Sonny was lucky to get a few fragments in a week. He had also been much more prone to ending up bloodied and one step away from death. But now, things were slowly changing. He couldn't even remember the last time he felt compelled to say goodbye to life. "Ah, you idiot. You just had to go and think that out loud, huh?" Just as he finished that thought, a distant sound of footsteps reached his ears. Chapter 98 Uninvited Guests. Sonny looked grimly at the corpse of the blood fiend, then in the direction of the approaching footsteps. Who was crazy enough to remain in this cursed city during the night? Only a complete lunatic would do something that stupid. All the sane people were long gone from the streets, not to mention that very few were willing to enter the ruins to begin with. A dark shadow flowed from the tip of the midnight shard's blade. Coalescing on the ground, it stared at him with sarcasm. Sonny stared back. "What?" The shadow shook its head and didn't answer, forcing him to turn away with a confused shrug. "Whatever. It seems we have guests. What to do, what to do? The place is a mess." Looking around, Sonny sighed, glanced at the corpse of the monster once again, and summoned the Kanai. The smart thing to do was to run away. Who knew what exactly was producing those footsteps? Maybe it was a group of people. Maybe it was a nightmare creature with a lot of feet. It was better not to find out. He wasn't done with the hunt yet. He still had to get his trophies. "Go take a look." Sending the shadow away, Sonny kneeled and began to cut the tough flesh of the dead creature. Without the enhancing effect of the shadow, slicing the blood fiend apart was not as easy. However, he still managed to find the first soul shard rather quickly. One more to go. Meanwhile, the shadow had discovered the uninvited visitors. 6 humans were cautiously walking along the narrow path in the stone ruins, lighting their way with a ghostly blue lantern. They were all rugged men, wearing mismatched suits of armor and armed to the teeth. Their eyes were cold and hard. Sonny raised his eyebrows. My oh my! They really are people. What is a bunch of Gunlog's thugs doing outside the castle walls in the middle of the night? Gunlog was the owner of the castle and the self-proclaimed king of this odious place. Every sleeper on the Forgotten Shore was forced to either serve him or pay him tribute. Even still, the latter usually didn't live long. Dismissing the Midnight Shard and the Parrot Rock, Sonny concentrated on searching for the second Soul Shard. He wanted to be gone from the street before these gentlemen arrived. But the circle of blue light was approaching too fast. Finally catching a glimpse of the glowing crystal, Sonny grabbed it and hurriedly hid it in his armor. Then he dropped the kunai on the ground and took several steps back. But it was too late. They had already seen him. Be careful! There's a monster! As Sonny was backing away, several weapons were aimed in his direction. Feeling that things were about to get out of control, he cleared his throat and said in a trembling voice, Oh! Please don't hurt me! I'm a human! Saying this, he mentally looked himself over. With his ghostly pale skin and dirty hair, his ragged armor covered in layers of dried and fresh blood, Sonny was indeed easy to mistake for a nightmare creature. He wasn't really paying much attention to personal hygiene and appearances these days. Hopefully, speaking in a human language would prove his identity. Raising his hands to show that he wasn't armed, Sonny took another step back. The 6 sleepers were really surprised to see another human this far away from the walls of the castle, especially at night. Using their momentary confusion, he cautiously moved even further away. Don't move! Finally able to comprehend the situation, one of the castle inhabitants hissed a threatening command. Sonny obediently froze, careful not to make any sudden movements. The unexpected guests proceeded to come closer, glancing at the corpse of the blood fiend as they walked past it. One of them was taller and better equipped than the rest. Piercing Sonny with a menacing gaze, he approached him and stopped 1 or 2 steps away. The man was older than Sonny by a few years. He was tall and muscular, with a patchy beard covering the lower part of his face and a mean look in his watery blue eyes. From his demeanor and memories, it was easy to tell that the leader of the group had spent no less than 3 years on the Forgotten Shore. He had experience and time to grow stronger than most sleepers here. However, it was also apparent that he wasn't really high up in the ranks of Gunlog's army. Otherwise, his equipment would have been much more impressive. Still, the heavy battle axe that was resting on the man's shoulder looked really sharp. It would take him only a second to bring that thing down on Sonny's head. Who are you? What the hell are you doing here? Sonny blinked a couple of times, then gulped and answered carefully. I'm Sunless. I live here. The leader of the hunting party, if that what it was, narrowed his eyes. What, live here? Do you take me a fool, boy? No one can survive in the city. The other sleepers were of the same opinion, except for one, who looked at Sonny with doubt. Frowning, he took a step forward and said in an uncertain tone, Wait, Chief. He might be telling truth. I heard that there's a crazy kid who lives in the ruins alone. The taller man scowled. How is that possible? His subordinate glanced at Sonny and shrugged. From what I heard, his aspect allows the boy to hide in the shadows really well. I guess he crawls around like a rat and picks up the leftovers after the monsters are done eating. I don't really know, but someone was talking about him back in the castle. I thought they were just telling tales. Sonny frowned. Crazy boy rat, why did everyone feel compelled to call him names? Meanwhile, the helpful sleeper thought for a bit and added, I think he came into town with that bitch, Changing Star. Sonny's frown turned into a scowl. Looking down, he whispered to his shadow. These guys are really very rude, don't you think? Of course, his whisper was easily heard by everyone around. The sleeper stared at him in confusion. Sonny tilted his head a little and opened his eyes wide, as if shocked by something. What? You think I should kill them all? I mean, isn't it a little bit over the top? I should give them a chance to apologize, at least. The leader of the hunting party took a step forward and said in a low, growling voice, "What are you mumbling about, Rat?" Sonny looked at him with scorn and dissatisfaction. "Hey, I was talking to my buddy. Can you please not interrupt?" A wide, dangerous smile appeared on the tall man's face. With a sigh, Sonny turned to him and said, "All right, if you insist. You guys have offended my dearest friend, Nephis of the Immortal Flame clan. She and I are very, very close. So I'll give you one chance to apologize for calling her a, well, you know. If you don't, say goodbye to your lives." The older man stared at him for several seconds, then suddenly raised his head and laughed. "Oh, that's a good one. Have you heard, guys? This tiny weasel will give us a chance. How generous! Should we be generous too, huh? What do you say? The boy is sick in the head, after all." The other 5 sleepers were not sharing his enthusiasm. One of them smiled darkly and said, "No, Chief. I think we should just kill him. Put the poor fool out of his misery, you know." The sleeper that had corroborated Sonny's story before, meanwhile, was frowning again. "Wait, guys, he's one of Changing Star's people, remember? The original group, I mean. They had survived 2 entire months in the labyrinth on their own. We shouldn't underestimate TH." However, the leader interrupted him with a contemptuous scoff. "I heard that St. Nephis carried 2 useless sacks of shit on her back all the way to the castle. The bitch is fond of taking care of weaklings, right? That delicious little friend of hers is blind, for God's sake. I'm sure that this one is no better." Then, he turned to Sonny and grinned. "I tell you what, Rat. Give us all your memories, and we'll be generous enough to let you live." If an awakened died, their memories disappeared with them. The only way to get the memories was to make the owner transfer them of their own free will. However, whether or not that will was affected by coercion or torture didn't really matter. At least not to people like these. Sonny blinked. "So you're not going to apologize?" The tall man grinned. "I think not." Sonny sighed. "Oh well. So you want my memories, eh? I have a few. Let me think, how about this one?" Lowering one hand, he summoned the parrot rock. It immediately appeared on his palm, looking as boring and ordinary as always. The leader of the hunting party frowned, not taking his eyes away from Sonny's face. Despite his crude exterior, he was paranoid and careful. Years of experience had taught him to never lower his guard. A moment later the rock spoke. "Behind you!" That was the most basic of tricks. The tall man grinned, still looking Sonny in the eyes. "Do you really think that I would fall for?" However, before he was done talking, the blade of the kunai hit him from behind, penetrating the back of the man's skull and killing him on the spot. Chapter 99 Pursuit. Sonny had dropped the throwing dagger near the monster's body in advance, and then took all those steps back to make this exact situation possible. As soon as the parrot rock spoke, he pulled on the invisible string, sending the kunai flying back in his direction. The tall bastard didn't just happen to be in its path, either. "You have slain. The leader of the hunting party really should have listened to that rock." Shadow grows stronger. Before the sleepers even had time to react, Sonny was already moving. The shadow had been wrapped around his body a long time ago, making him that much faster. Summoning the Midnight Shard, he fluidly slashed at the nearest enemy, severing the man's arm at the elbow. The blade struck right between the vambrace and the couture of his enchanted plate armor. To Sonny, these people were slow and clumsy, their power level and technique severely lacking. He had already been more experienced than them after the harrowing journey through the Crimson Labyrinth, learning how to wield the sword in combat from Changing Star herself. The 3 months he had spent hunting and surviving alone in the Cursed City only made the gap that much wider. Despite looking like easy prey, Sonny was anything but. However, he wasn't foolish enough to challenge all 5 of them. People might have been weaker than nightmare creatures, but what made them really dangerous was their unpredictability. Each aspect was unique, arming humans with a formidable arsenal of inexplicable abilities. Facing something you couldn't understand was the surest way to end up dead. With his advantage of surprise gone, Sonny decided that it was time to retreat. Turning around, he jumped out of the circle of light and ran. It was really hard to pursue someone who could see in the dark on these narrow streets, so there was a real chance of escaping unscathed. However, the kunai was still attached to Sonny's wrist. Sliding out of the dead leader's skull, it fell to the ground and clinked loudly against the stones, then jumped a few meters away and hit the pavement again, creating more noise. "Get the bastard! He killed the chief!" Following the sound of metal striking against stone, the sleepers lunged forward, following in Sonny's footsteps. What a persistent bunch! Even the guy who had lost his arm was on his heels, either having a way to stop the bleeding or simply unwilling to let the attacker escape even if it cost him his own life. This part of the city was Sonny's hunting ground. He knew every nook and cranny of these streets like his own 5 fingers. Honestly, he was unsure what these guys were even thinking. If it wasn't for him carefully choosing the path, they would have ended up disturbing some terrifying fallen creature and becoming its dinner a long time ago. Something wasn't quite right here. Gunlog's people might have been thugs, but they were experienced and accomplished hunters. They feared the city and knew how to behave while outside the castle walls. Otherwise, all of them would have been dead a long time ago. Come to think of that, it was extremely rare to see them going anywhere near the city at night. Were these fools even real hunters? If not, what were they up to? Sonny briefly considered leaving one of them alive to interrogate later, but then decided against it. To be honest, he wasn't really curious. Human business had long ago lost its allure in his eyes. He had much more interesting things to do. Finally reaching his goal, Sonny lingered on the steps, pretending to be in a panic. The 5 sleepers were once again able to lay eyes on their victim. The scrawny kid was hesitating in front of the entrance to a large ruined building, fear clearly written on his dirty, pale face. It seemed as though he didn't know where to go, afraid to run into a dead end. Noticing them, he flinched and dove into the building with desperation in his eyes. "You have nowhere to run now, rat!" hissed the man who had lost his hand to Sonny's blade. Full of killing intent, the sleepers followed the crazy young man into the building. However, once they got inside, they saw no sign of the scared kid. The only thing they saw was a simple rock lying on the floor. As the one-armed man belatedly realized that something was wrong, the rock said in an ominous tone, "Say goodbye to your lives." A second later, a massive silhouette stepped out of the darkness. The man's eyes widened as the figure of a regal knight clad in a menacing black armor reflected in them. The creature was more than 2 meters tall, his Gothic armor forged from a lusterless, anthracite steel. Every part of the armor was decorated with intricate engravings that told a tale so horrifying that anyone would go insane from looking at them for too long. The helmet of the Black Knight was crowned with curved horns that might have been wings once. In the narrow fissure of his visor, 2 ghastly red flames were burning with indescribable menace. Before the sleeper had time to react, a heavy black blade fell from above, effortlessly severing his body from head to groin, cutting through flesh, bone and armor with similar ease. A torrent of blood surged to the floor. Climbing onto one of the supporting beams of the ruined cathedral, Sonny sat down and looked at the slaughter that was happening below. Huh! The bastard is in a really bad mood today. Well, have fun! Some time later, as the echoes of screams began to fade away, he sighed and counted the corpses lying on the distant floor. It was hard to count, because most of them were in pieces. Making sure that not one of the pursuers got away alive, Sonny frowned and shook his head. 6 people. Their disappearance won't go unnoticed. Especially if they were really up to no good. Why do I feel like I had just gotten myself in trouble?